Okay, welcome to another episode of the Pilot's Lounge at Ground Control RC. It's been a while since I've done one of these episodes because from late November, Thanksgiving through the first of the year, it's a difficult time to do hobby stuff. That's a time for family, and that's what I do. I enjoy spending time with family during the holidays. So there probably will never be an episode of this in December and January, but we'll try and do 10 episodes a year. But anyway, to get started, as I always do, let me first go over the items that have not been covered since episode 9. Chuck glider conversion with a tractor motor. That's still on my list of to-do projects. Volantex Super Cub flapper-on setup. First I had to do some test flights of that plane after repairing the elevator clip on it. I did that. That video has been posted. That worked out great. We'll see how long that lasts or if I have to make further modifications to it, but I'm happy with it right now. And so the next step will be replacing the single servo with 2 servos to set up flapper-ons on that plane. I think it's a good candidate for that, and I already have the parts to do it, so I just need to set aside the time. JJRC H31 quadcopter, I really want to do that too, make it a better quad. I have a B-core flight controller that I could put in it. Of course, I'm going to put an FPV, a micro FPV system on it. Just need time set aside to do that. Some of these projects might take a couple more months, maybe 3 months to get through, but I'll eventually get through them. Review update. Bench testing of the RacerStar 1408 1400 kV motor with the 9x5 prop. I've tested with a 9x5 prop. I've tested with an 8x4 prop. I think the sweet spot for that motor on a 3S may very well be a 9x3/8 prop. Okay, I think the 9x5 prop just a little bit too much pitch for the amount of torque that motor has. So I have a 9x3/8 prop on order, and I will be testing it with that. I'll do another bench test, thrust test of that motor with the 9x3/8 prop and come to a conclusion on which prop I would select for that motor for a larger plane. HTIRC Hornet Series 20 amp 12 amp ESCs. Issues. I have reference those issues in my video post on the field test of those ESCs. On the bench test, I did not see a problem with those speed controllers. They worked well, you know, with my servo ESC tester with the same motor prop LiPo combination that I use out in the field. And but out in the field, when I was testing the 12 amp and the 20 amp HTIRC Hornet Series ESCs, and it didn't happen all the time, but I would say about 50% of the time, when you were throttling up to get ready to launch your plane, as soon as you hit 40% throttle on the transmitter, the speed controller would immediately jump up to about 60% throttle. It didn't happen all the time. Like I said, you might put 3 battery packs to it and have that problem. On the 4th battery pack, the throttle will be completely linear. You know, it wouldn't have that power band issue. And I programmed the high end and the low end of the throttle stick of the transmitter with both of those speed controllers several times. Didn't help. So at this point, I cannot recommend the HTIC Hornet Series 20 amp 12 amp ESCs due to that problem, unless they have come out, and I haven't checked, unless they have come out with a firmware that you can load on those speed controllers that takes care of that issue. But you know, you shouldn't have to do that. It shouldn't have been shipped that way to begin with. So I won't be buying any more of those, and I don't recommend them. Field testing. Field testing of the RacerStar BR2406S 2600 kV motor. I tested it a few flights on the Alpha series of our F22, our Glue and Fly series F22 Mini version 3, the Alpha build, and I have been flying it exclusively on this plane, which is our beta build, and I really like that motor. The 2207 and the 2406S both are really good motors, good candidates for this. At this point in time, I'm going to recommend the 2406S as the preferred motor for this Parkjet, and the RacerStar 2207 2500 kV as the alternate motor. Both of them work very, very well. The 2207 2500 kV has a little bit better efficiency than this motor does. This motor will provide more thrust, more speed, more punch out power, you know, but it will draw a little more amperage, and the efficiency is just slightly lower than the 2207, and the two motors weigh almost, their weight is almost identical, so there's no weight penalty. So yeah, I really like both those motors, but the 2406S is the one I'm going to go with as a preferred motor on the version 3 F22 of our Glue and Fly series, and we are currently testing this plane out now. All right, the RacerStar 1407 3500 kV motor, which is the motor that I use on our latest version 2 of the Glue and Fly series F22 Micro, and that's a really good motor. You get a lot of speed, a lot. You know, it has more torque than the 1306 does. At first, I was kind of hesitant to put a 1407 on that little micro Parkjet, but it has worked out really, really well, and I really like that motor. So that's a big thumbs up for that motor. Field testing, Glue and Fly series F22 Mini version 3B. I have 15 flights on this plane now, and I'm just having a blast with it. Made some modifications from the alpha build. Some of the changes were physical changes to the airframe. Some of the changes were in the plans that just make it a little bit easier during the build process. So I think that the performance on the beta, from what I've seen so far on my first 15 flights, the performance is slightly improved from the alpha version with no regressions. I also think that the changes that we made to the airframe, it also has, I think, a little better response in the roll axis, and the center of mass for all of your electronics, your battery and stuff is more concentrated, so you get a little bit better response in the pitch axis of the plane, because the weight is more concentrated than it was in the alpha build. So far, it looks great. I'm going to wait for E3 Scott. He's weathered in right now. As soon as he can get some test flights on the airframe and validate what I found during my test flights, this may very well be our production build. So, but it's probably going to take 3 or 4 weeks to come to that conclusion, because he's going to be weathered in, I think, for probably, I think he said about 2 weeks before it's going to clear up where he lives, so that he can get out and perform the test flights. I think he's going to have the beta version built by the end of this week, ready to go. But I understand how it is being weathered in. So that's where we are with that project. The RacerStar 30 amp Opto Light ESC that we converted using a switching voltage regulator that provides 5 volts, 3 amps of power. I have used the Blue Sky S-Spec, or switching voltage regulator, to convert these Opto ESCs, and I have used the Hobby King micro switching voltage regulator to also convert these Opto ESCs, the RacerStar 30 amp Optos and the FET 20 amp Optos, and so far I have not had a single problem with those, and I've got well over 100 flights on those speed controllers and those micro switching voltage regulators. So that combination is just awesome. I mean, that's what I'm doing from now on. It's a win-win situation. So, and projects that have been completed: the Volantex Super Cub elevator repair and test flights. I've completed those. Flew very well. It's just a fun little plane to fly, and it's just a 2S plane. But it's fun to fly. It's fairly, you know, for a Super Cub, you can do some basic acrobatics with it, you know, and for a Cub, it flies pretty fast, and it's pretty easy to fly, I have to say, you know, for a traditional airframe. I have a lot of fun with it, and it's a fairly inexpensive plane. So, except for the elevator design flaw that they had on there, it's a pretty darn good plane. Okay, the Volantex Ranger G2 motor thrust angle modification. Did a tutorial on that, and then the test flight. So I think I have 3 test flights on that plane since I have performed the modification of the thrust angle. And I will put in the show notes of this video, I will put links to those tutorials and the test flights. But it's like a different plane, you know, the way it handles now since I did the the motor thrust angle modification on that plane. When I first took that plane out, it was the first time I'd ever flown a plane like that, you know, with the high pylon mounted motor. And I throttled up about between 60 to 70% throttle. I didn't have any flaps in it. I didn't have any trim in the elevator, and I launched it, and it immediately nosed down. That's how bad the thrust angle was on that plane before I did the modification. So then the next time, when I figured out what the heck was going on with it, why it was doing that, the next time that I went out to launch the plane, I separated the Y cable from the 2 independent servos on the ailerons and put those into completely separate channels so that I could program flaperons on that plane. The next time that I went out to fly it, I put full down flaps and I put full up trim on the elevator and then launched it. And then I was able to launch it at 60 to 70% throttle without it nosing down. But I didn't want to have to do that all the time. So I went ahead and I modified the thrust angle. So the first test flight that I went out after I had made that modification, I had the flaps only at 50% instead of full, and I had absolutely no trim into the elevator, and I launched it 60-70% throttle. And although the airframe, you know, dropped a little bit until it picked up airspeed, just like any plane will do, like my Parkjets will do when you launch them, but it didn't nose down at all. So that was fantastic. And I noticed that when I was coming in for a landing, when I put 50% flap in, it actually nosed up a little bit. So now it's performing like the plane should perform. And normally when you have flaps in, you're going to put a little bit of down trim in your elevator to keep the plane level, because it produces more thrust with the flaps and it wants to nose up. So I was happy to find that when I went out and did the first test flight after this modification, and I put in 50% flaps when I was getting ready to come in for a landing, that it actually nosed up like it should have. So I would say that the modification that I made to the thrust motor, the motor thrust angle, I would say mitigated at least 90% of that. Now I haven't got it all trimmed in yet, because it was a little bit windy when I went out and did this test flight. But I would come in kind of slow at level flight, and then I would just hammer the throttle. And it would just push down ever so slightly, you know, as soon as I hammered the throttle. Nothing like it was doing before. So I'm not sure at this point if it nosed down because the pylon is pushing the nose down, even though I've got that thrust angle where it should be, going through the center of gravity in the main wing, or if it's because I don't quite have it trimmed correctly. So I'm hoping that I can take it back out when I've got calmer wind and get the plane completely trimmed out, and then perform that test again, and then I will have a definitive answer. We've completed the test flights of the Glue and Fly Series F22 Mini version Alpha, the Alpha build of this plane. The Alpha build was great. It flew, I mean, it was so close to being production ready. It was amazing the first time out with it. So we wanted to make some modifications to the Alpha airframe. A lot of those were just to make it easier to build. Other changes were were aesthetic. You know, I didn't like when I did the modification of the nacelle on the Alpha build, I didn't like the look of it. So one of the things that I did on the beta version was I modified the nacelle, and now I think it's large enough and it looks good. It's large enough that there's not going to be any drag created. It's got a large enough opening for airflow going through the nacelle that's not going to be a problem. And after 15 test flights with it at full throttle passes, I have not seen any issues. So Some of them were aesthetic, some of them were to increase the performance as much as we could from the alpha version, and some of them were just to make it easier to build. So in both areas, I think we've succeeded. Okay, and project update on the the converted EPP glider, 48 centimeter wingspan EPP glider that we converted into an RC glider with a brushless motor. I had a post on here from Scott Dan, and he referenced the fact, and honestly, when I started the conversion on this plane, I could not even see where the seam was on this canopy. What he's stating is that the black canopy should just lift off with some force. He said no need for knives or saws to cut the canopy off. Okay, so I will check that on one of my other gliders, because when I ordered this, I ordered 3 of them. I will have to double check that and then update the notes on this video to let you know. But Scott says that this center, you've got this outer ridge here, and then you've got this center. To me, it looked like they were glued together. But he stated that they're not, in fact, glued together, and that you can force the centerpiece of this black canopy off without having to cut through that foam. So that's going to be a win-win situation, because I want to convert another one of these with a tractor motor. It's in my to-do list that I mentioned earlier. So, and that would make it so much easier to be able to pull this off and then hollow it out and not have to cut it off first, and it would look a lot better. So, in the pipe, Glue and Fly Series F22 Mini version 3 beta test flights. That's what I'm doing right now. Glue and Fly Series, backyard indoor plane. One of the things I've been wanting to do for a while is just to build, sometimes I don't want to pack everything up and go out to the field. Sometimes I would just like to go outside with a little backyard model, a model that you could fly inside a gymnasium, and just go out and sit in a chair and just fly at FPV, around the yard, around the property, without having to pack everything up, go out in the desert and go flying. So one of the things on my project list is to try to design and build a small backyard or indoor flyer. I have ordered some 1020 brushed motors. It's probably going to be a brushed system, but 1020 brushed motors with 3-inch props that are direct drive, so you don't have another failure point of a gearbox with a brushed motor. So I'm going to be testing those motors and props out to see how much thrust they will produce. I think that with the electronics that I've used in the past for my conversions, with the servos and stuff, I think that I can design and build one of these things so that with a micro FPV system, we're talking about somewhere between 40 to 50 grams all up weight, with a little landing gear, a tail dragger with a little landing gear. So I'm hoping that these 1020 brushed motors with these 3-inch props that are direct drive will produce, I'm hoping, at least 60 to 70 grams of thrust. But I will be putting those on my thrust stand, and I will be testing those just to see if that will be feasible for doing that project. But that's the way I would like. I would rather just put, these little, because I want to run it off of a 1-cell LiPo. And right now you just can't get a micro brushless motor on a 1-cell that's going to produce as much thrust as a brushed motor on a 1-cell. So that's what I'm looking to do. And when I get that, if it's successful, then I'll provide the plans for you guys to build it yourself. But anyway, that's what's going on in our world. Oh, and I wanted to thank all of you who have used our affiliate links to buy the electronics that we buy and review and test and use in our projects, or the planes or the quadcopters that we buy and review and provide links to. I want to thank you so much, because when you guys buy through our affiliate links, we get a small commission from that sale. You get it at the same price, but we get a small commission off of that sale. And over time that helps us out. It really does. And that's the only revenue that we make right now and we put it right back. We put it right back into products to review. So that's a huge help. That keeps us going without having to pull too much money out of my pocket to do it. So thank you. That's another episode of the Pilot's Lounge. Thank you for watching. Please give a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to check out our Patreon site. We have a lot of free content there as well. And I will see you in the air.